Hello dear, hi kids. Good afternoon. And how are you doing today? And how's the holiday coming up? I hope you're having a swell time enjoying your holidays. And how is the summer school going and the many things you are learning? I hope you're having fun. So I'm just gonna do a summary of what we learned at the last Bible Club for week 2. Okay, so we learned about the books of history. You see, in the Bible, the previous week we learned about 5 books of the Bible, which is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. So this week we're learning about the history books. And there are 12 of these books in the Bible, but we decided to break it into 2. This week we learned 7 books, and then next week we're going to learn the other 5 books, because the history books has 12 books in them. Okay, so this week we learned about Joshua, Judges, Ruth, First Samuel, Second Samuel, First Kings, and Second Kings. Okay, so in the book of Joshua we learned about it summarizes how the children of Israel left Egypt, and then they were approaching and they got to the promised land. But in the promised land, there were too many pagan gods which consistently turned their backs to the Almighty God. Okay, go with me. The pagan gods, the false god, turned their backs, the backs of the hearts of the children of Israel, to the true God. Okay, instead of loving God and staying with the God that saw their fathers through Egypt into the promised land, but they forgot about the true God and began to follow after the false gods. You see, these children of Israel, okay, were not the same people who left Egypt. You know why? Because they were the children of the people that originally left Egypt. Okay, it was their fathers and their forefathers who left Egypt. So these children did not know about God, did not know the beautiful works of Jesus parting the Red Sea and letting them pass through the Red Sea into the promised land. Okay, they didn't know how God brought down the locust to destroy the farms of the children of Egypt, so that they could live. They didn't know of those mighty works the Lord did when he was rescuing their forefathers from the hands of the Egyptian. How God sent locusts, how God made Moses' stick swallow all the others. Moses' stick become a serpent, and his serpent swallowed up all the other serpents of the sorcerers and the magicians. They didn't know how God killed the firstborn sons and the firstborn cattle of the children of Egypt when their forefathers were to leave Egypt. So they didn't know the true God because their parents never taught them about the true God. This way, they got distracted by the false gods, and then they kept turning their backs away from God. And in doing this, they kept sinning, and God kept loving them, and God come bringing them back to himself. They will repent of their sins, and God kept taking them back. But at some point, because they kept turning their backs on God, God let their enemies defeat them in battle, and by defeating them in battle, they took them upstage. They became captives of their enemies. You know what you mean, captives? You become slaves. They became slaves of their enemies. Okay, so in the process, in one major story we learned in Joshua was how the Lord destroyed the wall of Jericho. The children of God sang around the wall, and the wall was destroyed. So we played a game called the Wall of Jericho. I'm sorry you missed that, but we're going to repeat it in week 3 so that you can learn about that game. It's a very beautiful game, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. Okay, so we learned about the book of Joshua, and in the book of Joshua, because one of the very famous stories in Joshua is the wall of Jericho. So we learned about the wall. The hand motion for the wall of Jericho is like a wall falling. So you throw down your hands like a wall falling. So we did this. You throw down your hand, okay? You throw it down. That's how to remember the book of Joshua. So we learned about the book of Judges. So you see, in the book of Judges, every time the children of Israel turned their back on God and God made their enemies to defeat them, God always sent, because God is a loving God. God is so loving. Even when you sin, He keeps taking you back because His love is so deep that it cannot let you go. So in the process of them being defeated by their enemies, God always sent an hero to rescue them. Always sends an hero to rescue them. And one of these heroes is Gideon. We have Shamgar, we have Deborah. Deborah was a woman warrior whom the Lord used to rescue the children of Israel from the hands of their enemies. And we said something about the judges. The judges are regular human beings like you and I. Are human beings like you and I, who the Spirit of God always rested upon. So do this with me. They are normal human beings whom the Spirit of God always rested upon. They are normal human beings like you and I, whose the Lord's Spirit always rested upon. So do this with me. They are normal human beings like you and I, whom the Spirit of God always rested upon. And when the Spirit of God rests upon them, like Samson, he could do mighty things. Samson was able to pull down an entire wall, was able to uproot a gate of a city and relocated it somewhere else. Do you imagine what the gate of an entire city would look like? So big and so gigantic, and the power of God rested upon Samson. He was able to carry it and take it upon a mountain. So in learning about the book of Judges, if you know Judges in the human in the judiciary system, always use an instrument called the gavel. I'm sure you'd have seen it where they will say, "Boom, arise, let the court arise." So we form our hands like a gavel. Do this with me. We form it like a gavel, and then you do this. Judges, okay? Judges, yes, judges. You're getting it. Do it again. Judges. So we learned about Joshua, like throwing your hands down, Joshua, and then Judges. Okay, so after we left the book of Judges, we learned about the book of Ruth. Ruth, we said, was a lady from a pagan nation, that is a nation who didn't know the true God, but got married, and then her husband died, and her husband's brother also died, and then her mother-in-law was very sad. Her mother-in-law lost all her sons, but Ruth left a pagan nation to be able to take care of her mother-in-law called Naomi. In the process, Ruth found a man who loved her very much, and his name was Boaz. And she found this man where she was treading wheat. It was a threshing floor where you thresh wheat. Which threshing of wheat means you are removing the shaft of the wheat so that it becomes edible. That is, you're removing the shaft on the grain so that it becomes edible. Okay, so in the process of doing that, she met a man that loved her so much, whose name was Boaz. Whose name was what? Boaz. And in the process of that, after she got married, she had her own children, and then she had great-grandchildren, and one of those great-grandchildren was the King David. Yes, mighty King David. You must have heard of him before. Yes, was mighty King David. She got a great-grandson was King David. And you see, Ruth is very important in the lineage of Jesus Christ, because as you know, Jesus Christ is usually called the son of David because he came from the lineage of David. So Ruth was David's great-grandmother, and yes, was Jesus's great-great-great-great-grandmother. There were so many generations in between. Okay, so in learning about Ruth, we try to, you bend down and try to pick wheat. That's how to remember the book of Ruth. So let's do this together. Try and pick something from the floor. Yes, that's how we learned about the book of Ruth. So let's do this again from Joshua to Ruth. You throw your hands down. Joshua. Judges. and Ruth. Yes, that's what we did. And then after the book of Ruth, we learned about the book of First Samuel and Second Samuel. So this is how we remember First Samuel and Second Samuel. We do this first and an S. You draw your hand like an S. So let's go. First, second, Samuel. Let's go again. First, second, Samuel, like an S. Yes, that's how we remember the book of Samuel. And then in the book of Samuel, we learned about the prophet Samuel, how God called him. He was living with his mentor Eli, and then God called him into ministry. And somebody said something which is very true in the class while we're in class. Said, yes, Samuel was the prophet who anointed King David, So in the book of Samuel, we learned about some of the kings in Israel, some of the kings of Israel, and one of those famous kings is King David, and then King Solomon. We learned about all of those. Okay, we find these stories in the book of First Samuel and Second Samuel, and then we go on to First King and Second King. In the book of First King and Second Kings, tells us the story of the kings of Israel. And then at the point in the lifetime of Solomon, the Lord took, after Solomon died, in the lifetime of Solomon, there was a prophecy that it was going to tear Israel apart, meaning it was going to divide Israel. All right. So that prophecy came true after King Solomon died. Okay. After King Solomon died, whereas 10 tribes of Israel were on one side, and then the other 2 were on the other side, and the 10 tribes of Israel became known as Israel. They retained the name Israel. However, Judah, the tribe of Judah and Benjamin, became known as Judah. So Israel was torn into 2. You can say they became 2 nations. Yes, indirectly they became 2 nations. One was Israel and the other was Judah. So the book of First Kings and Second Kings compared the lives of the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah together. And then you hear things like in the 5th year of King Jeroboam's reign, another king was also reigning in Judah. So it compared the lifestyle of the kings of Israel and the lifestyle of the kings of Judah. Okay, so, and we said something that because the First Kings and Second Kings tells us things like, at the end of it all, you hear, and he didn't walk in the ways of his father David. So we said King David was the yardstick for the lives of the other kings of Israel. Every time you hear God in the Bible, the Lord is comparing them and saying they didn't walk in the way of their father David. So David, we said, is the yardstick the Lord used to compare other kings of Israel and the other kings of Judah. So in learning about First Kings, to remember First Kings and Second Kings, just position your hand like you're trying to wear a crown. Okay? Just imagine that you were just coronated as the king of Nigeria, as the king of the United Kingdom, and the king of Edinburgh, let's say, or the king of Isheri Olofi Kingdom. All right. So position like someone is trying to put a crown on your head, or you're trying to put a crown on somebody else's head, and then you do this way. Okay. So that's how we learn about First King and Second King. So you do this: First, Second Kings. Let's go. First, Second Kings. Let's go again. First, Second Kings. So can we take it from the top, from the book of Joshua? You throw your hands down like a wall that is falling. Okay, so we go Joshua, Judges, Ruth, First Samuel, First and Second Samuel, First and Second kings. So that's what we learned this week. I hope you have a fantastic week ahead. Bye.